Yes, everyone, thanks for tuning in to another video. As always, it's a pleasure. And as always, if you get any value from the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you've got any thoughts or comments, leave them in the comment section. I will get back to you. And if you've got any sort of goals, whether that's fitness goals or anything else, and you'd be interested in working one-on-one with me, you can fill out the form in the description and we can lock in a call. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my fitness tips when training with a condition such as psoriatic arthritis, because of course, when your body's in a lot of pain or you're restricted because of the amount of range of motion you may have, or because your condition's not allowing you to move freely, you may need to adjust your training style just in order to allow you to still make progress and move forward and, allow yourself to get the most out of any given workout. So the first adaptation I had to make was I really had to increase the length of my warm-ups. So of course, when I was working with my condition, because thankfully now I'm in remission, my body was pretty stiff and sore all of the time. So I used to have to really dedicate a good 30 minutes or so just to warming up properly, just to allow all the blood to kind of flow to the joints and just to feel loose. Because I sort of used to walk into the gym feeling like I already had extreme DOMs and like I couldn't really move properly. So I do lots of mobility stuff. I would always stretch after my workouts for quite a long time, but that's a whole separate issue. But I think that's a really important aspect, and it can be a little bit tedious. It can feel mundane, but at the end of the day, if you want to get the most out of your workouts, especially when you're working with, an inflammatory arthritic condition, then spending some time warming up is really going to allow you to get more out of the workout and also allow you to get, make more progress in the long run also. The second adaptation I used to have to make sometimes was I used bands a lot. Now, bands are great because for me, they didn't put a lot of pressure on my joints. So they're fine now, but these two fingers couldn't bend more than that for about 2 years before I started taking adalimumab. So it was really difficult for me to grip things properly. But of course, bands don't put the same amount of pressure on the joints. And bands are great. I also used to use these with my warm-ups when I was in a good enough space to go to the gym and train properly, or to a higher level, maybe I should say. So just simple things such as doing some pull-aparts, wrapping the band around an object so I could do some rows. And for me, just using bands just allowed me to stay consistent with my training. Even though I couldn't, train to a really high intensity, just continuously sending that muscle building signal is going to be really beneficial. And on certain days, sometimes I would just do 2 band workouts. So if you're working with a, arthritic condition or perhaps an autoimmune condition in general, and you're feeling, really stiff and inflamed, then bands can be really helpful. On top of that, of course, they also save you going to the actual gym. So if perhaps you don't want to go to the gym when you're in a lot of pain or if you're flaring up, then using bands can be really beneficial. And honestly, there's a lot of stuff you can do with bands if you put your mind to them. Because at the end of the day, put your mind to it. Because at the end of the day, when we're working muscles, all we're trying to do is create resistance against a specific range of motion, right? So you can kind of imitate a movement using bands. So for example, bicep curls, or I can take this underneath my foot and do some sort of tricep extension. I can wrap this around something and then I can press it, for example. Now, of course, it's not going to give you the same benefits as if you're using free weights, but sometimes when you're working with your condition, you just have to make best use of the situation that you're in. So using bands was the other adaptation that I had to make. So another adaptation I used to have to make is I used machines a lot when my condition was flaring up. So now I just use free weights. I don't really use machines too much. I do sometimes, but the reason that I found machines really helpful is because they still allow me to really work the muscle and get a good range of motion. But of course, when you're using machines, they hold the weight in place for you. So you're much more stable. For example, when my condition was at its worst, I couldn't really squat and deadlift properly. It was just to get into a deadlift position was really challenging. And so, for example, trying to do like a barbell row would be really hard for me because I'd have to pick the weight up off the floor. But for example, doing some sort of seated row with a machine where the support is against your chest and you're creating this action was much easier for me. And I also felt that because it's a machine, again, it didn't put as much pressure on my fingers. And my fingers for me were a really big cause of pain and uncomfortability, as it were, when I was training and my condition was in a bad state. So using machines really helped you know, again, they just give you more stability, and compared to bands, they allow me to work at a higher intensity, even though I couldn't quite do all the exercises that I wanted to. So, using machines, that was another adaptation I had to make. The next adaptation that I made was doing a lot of isolation movements. So like I said, right now, I do a lot of compound lifts, because the thing is that realistically, compound lifts are going to give you the most bang for your buck in regards to exercise. So if you're not familiar with what a compound lift is, it's a movement where you move from more than one joint. So for example, a bicep curl, I'm just moving from my elbow, so that's an isolation. But a squat, if I'm bending my knees and sitting down, that's a compound lift, because I'm moving up my knees, my hips and my ankles. So when my condition was flaring up, I just had to do a lot of isolation lifts. So for example, I didn't squat, but I'd use the leg extension machine, I'd use the leg curl machine. It goes back to the using machines point, but for me, it still allowed me to stay consistent, and I may not have made gains, but I definitely maintained. Considering the amount of pain I was in and the way that I had to pivot and adjust my training, I'm pretty happy with how I sort of maintain myself. So doing isolation exercises, even though ideally I want to be doing big compound exercises, was another adjustment that I had to make. And then the last adaptation that I made was I did a lot of endurance style training. Now, what I mean by that is that, for those of you that aren't familiar, endurance intensity, you might say, is when you're lightening the weight and you're doing a lot of repetitions and you're doing maybe 2 or 3 sets. So right now, I like to do a lot of strength style training, which is you do 5 reps, 5 sets at a heavy weight, typically somewhere around 85% to 90% of your 1 rep max. But of course, when you're dealing with a arthritic condition, that's probably going to be out of range. So just by lightening the weight but increasing the reps, it still allowed me to build that muscle, send that muscle building signal, and to feel like I was making progress. But it just didn't create the issue with my joints, and it really allowed me to stay consistent. Because I think for me, if you're in a position where you can't train, you want to stay consistent, but you also don't want to get disheartened. So if you keep trying to go to the gym and you keep trying to push yourself and not being able to fulfill those expectations, I think that's probably going to diminish your spirit a little bit. But if you want to just lower the intensity down, still keep going, I think that's just going to make you feel good. Because for me, exercise was a really key aspect of staying mentally strong when my condition was bad. Now, that's not to say it was easy. It was definitely hard, and it definitely took up a lot more of my time. But at the same time, it still made me feel positive. We all know the endorphins and that kind of stuff. And it just allowed me to feel like I wasn't allowing my condition to own me. Like I was still taking control of my life in a way that I had to, or I had to accept was available to me at that point in time. So, working in endurance, higher reps, lower weight, that was the last adaptation that I made. So just to sum up, because I know that was quite a few points, the main adaptations were longer warm-ups, using bands, using machines, focusing on isolation exercises, and then lowering the weight but increasing the reps. So I hope you find that beneficial. Like I said, if you've got any thoughts or comments, you can leave them in the comment section. I will get back to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to work one-on-one with me, or you'd be interested, you can fill out the form in the description and I'll get back to you. I'll leave it at that for today. Anyway, wherever you are, I hope you have a cracking day or a peaceful evening. And until next time, stay blessed.